Restaurant Unstoppable. What the most successful restaurateurs know that you don't. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest. He is the CEO and founder of Meez, Josh. Sharkey, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I am, man. I'm feeling more unstoppable than ever today.
Yes,
especially
man.
with you here.
That is what we like to hear, and I cannot wait to dive into your story. But let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
So I think for today, I'm going to give you what matters most is not any one great accomplishment, but what you can do consistently every single day.
And I think this is probably the most over quoted quote for me on the show. Constant gentle pressure, Danny Myers, right? And it's like, and I think you can take that quote and apply it in a few different ways, but I think it kind of resonates here too. Is that it's not about who can go the hardest, the longest. It's about consistency. I think it's about staying up and just finding that balance of constant, and it's the constant that's important. Gentle pressure. What are your thoughts when I say that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, look, there's a lot of cliches to that. You overestimate what you can do in a year and underestimate what you can do in 10. And I try to do it with everything in my life, even from exercise to learning. You start with like one small exercise that you do every day and you can just build up on it. And you know what, more so ever now with technology, I've learned that, you're never going to get everything that you want right away. But if you try to get it too fast, you're just going to fail.
Yeah.
So it's funny because I've kind of bifurcated my life in terms of like tech and food, because I always consider myself a chef first. And then now that I run a tech company, it's a different world. But there are some things that are just a lot more heightened, when it comes to technology. But there's a lot of parallels to food too.
I'm interested in that, and hopefully some of those parallels come out. Listening to you talk, though, I also can't help but think, I think you're right. We tend to be over ambitious, generally speaking, and we have these audacious goals and dreams. And sometimes I think we start off chasing these goals and dreams, and maybe after 5 years of chasing these goals and dreams, we've made progress. We've made progress, but we're never where exactly we want to be. But at the same time, I think it's important to have your eyes forward, but also to turn around and look back, because sometimes you don't pay attention to the progress you have made, and I think that sometimes we get discouraged because we're not in our dream spot. But as long as you're chasing those dreams, you're still moving forward. And I think that's something that's worth bringing to the conversation. Are we being a dead horse to this point, or what are your thoughts when I say?
No, look, man, I think I'm probably guilty of not doing that nearly enough, not celebrating and sort of looking back. I'm sort of always thinking about what's next. But yeah, I think it's super important for a number of reasons. So I would agree.
Yeah, I love this. All right. So where does it make sense to start sharing your story? Because I know that you identify as a chef. You were a restaurateur. You were the founder chef of, was it Bark, New York City, 2009?
Yeah. I think to your point, starting with that is probably good, even though, now I'm running, a technology company, because Meez wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for sort of like the way in which it was kind of birthed. And, because I've been cooking my whole life. I started in the, when I was 16 in restaurants.
Okay.
But we can sort of talk about that story, but that was my whole life for like 20 plus years.
Yeah, let's get into it. Why did you get into this industry? What was it about this industry that pulled you in?
Well, originally, I think like a lot of people, it was more of a happenstance. Like I was in high school and I had a job in a restaurant, like a Mexican spot. I think it was Don Pablo's. And it was more of a job, I'm not going to lie. Didn't go to work sober all the time. But then, eventually my dad passed away when I was 16.
Oh, man,
and so I had to start cooking, for the family. And wrestling was always like a big part of my life through high school and in college, actually. So I always thought I was going to go to school for wrestling. And then I started getting hit up by this one school and called Johnson and Wales, which everybody, I think a lot of people probably know, but they actually have a really great wrestling program. And so for some reason it just sort of clicked, and I started thinking, hey, maybe I could cook as well. And so I sort of applied for the scholarship, got the scholarship, and found myself in culinary school. And that was in 1999, and I did not plan. It wasn't my plan originally, but then I sort of fell into it, like a lot of things.
Yeah. So at what point did you think that you had a knack for this, a talent for this? When did you know that this was supposed to be your path?
Well, I won a scholarship for this cooking contest to get into school, which, who knows what that really was. But then in school, I had jobs and, cooking, and I enjoyed it, but I entered another contest, which ended up being, I didn't realize how large of a contest it was. I think if I did, I probably would have been a lot more worried, but I ended up entering this contest it was like North and South America, and I think maybe Europe as well. And I won. So they flew me to New York City for the finals from Rhode Island. And, I was like this 19-year-old kid, and I was cooking for, Erica Pear and Marcus Samuelson and Rick Moonen and those guys. And this was 20 plus years ago. I didn't even know who they were, but I really, I loved what I was doing. It was really fun. And I ended up winning the whole thing. So I won this trip to Norway. So I got to travel through Norway with Repair and Rick Moonen and a bunch of other people. And I fell in love from there. So I staged at this Michelin star spot over there by this guy, Terje Ness, who just won Bocuse d'Or. And
I'm not going to let you just say you fell in love. I'm going to make you pull back a layer now. What was it specifically that resonated with you about this industry? What sucked you in? Why were you in love?
Well, I think it really was this restaurant in Norway, Oro. I got an apprenticeship there shortly, and everything was just every day. It was a new day. Like they got everything in new every day. So we had whole scallops and they would take out of the shell. And I just distinctly remember slicing shallots with this knife, and this cook like correcting me and kind of not yelling at me, but nudging me that like it wasn't good. And then I saw this guy was tremendous. He was the entremetier, and like, I saw him sort of like at service, like breaking down this fennel like it was a fish and confying it, like I was just amazed, like everything was just done at a level that I had never imagined. And I was like, wow, this is so much more than just preparing food.
And I wrestled too for a little while. I didn't take it into collegiate like you did, but I do see the parallels between being a wrestler and a chef, because really as a wrestler, it's a competition against yourself every day to get better and better and better. And I feel like that's a very much, because it's a solo sport, really. I mean, you play on a team, but really like it's one versus one, and I think that's, you can say the same thing about a chef. It's you versus yourself,
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that transfer, am I making is that a stretch?
I do. I think the more the parallel might just be with wrestling. I love wrestling. I think, my wife doesn't really want me to do this, but I really want my kid to wrestle, because just for any other reason that it just gives you a sense of discipline that a lot of sports don't. I think there are, most sports have some level of it, but with wrestling, it really is all on you. And, you're only going to ever be as good as the amount of discipline you put upon yourself. And so that really stuck with me forever. I remember, because when I was in high school and in college, I would get up at 4:35. I'd go running, I'd go work out, go to school, I'd go to my next practice, I'd work out. And then when I transferred that into cooking, moving to New York when I was, in 2000, I remember distinctly I had a job, and it was this thing. It was like the same thing. I worked, from like 6:30 a.m. to whatever, like, 3 a.m. most days, this job, but like on my days off. And when I did have time off, I would be at home practicing knife skills and practicing, or trying to get a, free work somewhere else, learning how to do charcuterie or how to butcher. And it was always just a constant, like, how do I improve? How do I get better? And I think that really did come from wrestling.
I'm not the least bit surprised. It's definitely a competition against yourself for sure. And those are just like some other like little, I mean, our audience is everybody from people aspiring to be restaurant owners, people in culinary school, to restaurant owners scaling. So if you're listening to this and you are in the earlier, stages, if you're learning, if you're a chef, if you're staging, like what Josh is sharing with us is key right now. Go get out there, go get experience, keep your liabilities as low as possible and just work for free. And you're thinking to yourself, but I should get paid for my work. You are getting paid with your network, by growing your network, by growing your knowledge. And I think what you did early on, like, that is key. Why is that so important?
No, I mean, look, I think it's everything, right? Being able to be self-motivated and to learn the value of that reciprocation, not always being money, but how, what's the difference between the thing I'm doing and the person next to me? And, that delta is always going to be hard work, right? And whatever sort of methodology you have for like striving farther than someone else, right? So that sometimes it's just like, how do you like hone your talent and how do you practice more? But you can't just assume that you go about your day the same way as everybody else and things are going to be the same. Right?
I love it. So you said you got this opportunity to cook under Eric Repair, travel with Eric Repair. Was he more of a, did he ever take on a mentor role to you? Or was it kind of not, did the relationship, did you learn anything from Eric is where I'm getting from this?
Well, I mean, I certainly learned a bunch from the time that we did a dinner together. But I don't actually, I still to this day don't know why the decision I made is what I made. But I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to choose between any of those chefs that I traveled with to take a job when I got back to New York. So I could work at for Chef Repair at Le Bernardin, or for Chef Moonin at Oceana, or Marcus when he had Aquavit, and I chose Rick Moonin. And I don't regret it at all. I think Rick is a tremendous chef. I think I learned so much there. But to this day, I don't actually remember when that decision sort of like came where I said, okay, that's the place I'm going to go to.
So real quick, you just kind of paint the picture for us. You go into the culinary, or sorry, Johnson and Wales, 1999. Was it a 4-year program?
No, it was like a year and a half. I did like, the 2 semesters, then I did an externship in oh my goodness, Nantucket.
Okay.
And then after the externship, I had like another semester. That was it. It was short.
Okay. So was your externship with Rick Noonan?
No. So after the externship, I finished up school, and then so I guess it was actually 2001 when I started working for Rick.
Where's Rick? Is he based in New York City?
Yeah, exactly. Oceana. So Rick, he has restaurants in Vegas now, but back in the day, he had a place called Oceana, which is still around. The Lavanos family owns it, and a number of great chefs have gone through there, and it's changed locations since then. But I started working there just before 9/11, because I remember I moved to New York in May of 2001, lived in like this basement in Queens. And in September was when 9/11 happened. And I just remember, like, we just like switched from being a restaurant for a week to being just fulfilling, like, we got in like a whole tuna and made tuna sandwiches for the entire, fire department.
That's amazing. So zoom up to 30,000 feet from me real quick. Between 2001 and 2009, just kind of like hit the major stops along the way. Don't pull back any layers. Just kind of take me on like a, just a quick tour.
So about a year and a quarter with Chef Rick at Oceana, and then I went to Tabla. I spent some time over in just like traveling a bit, and then went and worked for Chef Floyd at Tabla for a couple of years, and then I left Tabla in 2005. And took on a job as a sous chef at a place called Boulet in Tribeca, and these were all really great experiences. And then after Boulet, I went to work for Gray Kuntz, who's probably one of my greatest mentors, at Cafe Gray, and so I worked for Chef Gray for from 2005 until 2008, and then in 2008 is when I started working on Bark, the project that I opened with my business partner, and actually a lot of that development was done while I was at Cafe Gray.
Okay, so thank you for doing that. Any key where did you grow the most as a, not just as a, I mean, it's hard for chefs to not talk about being a chef. I get that. But really what my focus is on, I mean, okay, if you're listening to this podcast, I hope you can, or you know somebody who can cook, right? That's a given. But what I really want to get at is who taught you the most about how to be a restaurateur, how to run a business, how to scale a business, what it takes to really be profitable.
So, I mean, look, I just named the chefs that I worked for. I'm not going to lie. That was, restaurants are not easy to be profitable. Those restaurants that I worked at were not necessarily profitable. Cafe Gravy did 12 million in revenue and we were not making money. At Boulay, there was I think it was over 8 million in ARR and not making money. So I think a lot of what I learned about being a restaurateur was really, lessons on maybe what not to do, or what we saw that was happening about how we need to adjust.
This is gold, man. This is gold, because I think you're hitting on something, and this is something that I've definitely picked up on traveling around the nation, speaking to the most successful restaurateurs. Our industry is friggin' broken, dude. Like it's weird how like I'm going after the best of the best, right? And there's still an issue to be held on these pedestals, to be recognized as the best, and to still be scraping to get by and worrying about how you're going to pay your mortgage, how you're going to pay your employees. Like what's wrong with the industry in your eyes? What are we doing wrong? Why is it this way?
Well, I mean, look, I don't think it's all necessarily things that are done wrong. I think some of it is just look, perception is value, right? So people will only pay a certain amount for food, right? So there's no real sort of you can only charge so much, for a plate of food, which is unlike a phone where you can charge $1,200 for a phone, even if it costs you $100, right? And so I think that the restaurant industry, part of it is just that there's inherently just a ceiling to the amount of top line and the amount of you can charge for something, which is a big sort of handicap. But that said, I think that, the way that restaurants have operated for, honestly, if COVID did anything, I think it helped sort of illuminate that
how vulnerable we are.
That there's that restaurants are not nearly as nimble as they need to be, and they are a business first, right? So that before anything, it's a business, and then it's a craft, and then it's an art. And if you can't run a business, right, then you're not going to be able to do your craft. And I think that's why so many restaurants go out of business. And I think it's I think not understanding your numbers, not understanding sort of the metrics behind your business, and not understanding the levers you can pull, I think is something that for many years wasn't even in the conversation. It was, is it good, and can you get people to come to the door? So
you mentioned something earlier, and I want to kind of not challenge you, but kind of just explore this a little bit more. And I want to take it at face value. You said that there's a ceiling. There's this omnipresent ceiling, no matter where you are in the restaurant industry, of a certain profit you're going to earn, anywhere from say 10% to, let's say, if you're doing really well, 20%. What has to change for that ceiling to change? Why do you think there is a ceiling? What's the cause of that ceiling?
Well, I think the OpEx, right, is obviously a big part of it, right? So including rent, you real estate is just gets more expensive as the day goes on. And again, I just think that there's a cap to how much you can charge for any of these things, right? So it's there's products that outside of the restaurant business, the amount that you charge for anything is sort of gated by what people will pay for it, right? But that's happens in almost every industry other than the food business. You can't charge $80 for a burger.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, I think it's interesting. I think there was a period of time where success in the restaurant industry looked a lot like, how can we provide more value for less, right? And like that was the trend for say 20, 30 years. So we got to the point where we were able to put out really cheap shit fast, right? And then we got to the point where that was so bad that we were like, wow, there's actually a ton of opportunity if we choose to put out really good, high quality stuff, because there's a void in the market for that. And then we realized that, holy crap, it's expensive to put out really good stuff. And I just think we kind of did it to ourselves. And I think that we need to have these conversations about like we need to figure out what the value of food is, and we need to charge for that, and we need to help each other figure that out and to communicate and come together as an industry, because I think that's the only way we're going to overcome it, is if we educate each other and then we educate the consumer and say, hey, guess what? The days of 9% to 5% of your salary going towards food is over. Food is more valuable than that. Like, you need to spend more money on food and support your.
But I think it's a concerted effort. So it's also, the more that restaurants and operators are using great products and are using sustainable products and are buying from farms, the more that the market for those things go down, right? So when I started Bark in 2008, which is a sort of a artisan approach to American fast food, and it was all sort of, everything was, all of our sort of paper goods were biodegradable. So from potato or corn or soy, which, by the way, was literally it was impossible to find those things. We had to sort of aggregate from all these random places to be able to get them distributed to us into the restaurant, and they were very, very expensive. And the meat that we're using from a farm 30 minutes away from us was 5 times more expensive than any other just commodity meat, and that has shrunk a bunch, right? So it is now cheaper to buy biodegradable products than it was 10 years ago. It's now a little bit cheaper to buy meat that comes from a farm nearby you, right? It's still more expensive, but it's getting less expensive. The more that there's demand for those types of products, right, the less expensive they're going to be. So it's incumbent upon all of us to really to continue to do that, because that at least will lower the burden of that cost to us, right? Our COGS will go down slightly if we can use good products, and it's not going to cost nearly as much as it did 10 years ago. And again, that price can keep going down and down and down.
The change is happening, man. I think we're making progress, just for the record, but it's worth, echoing this as much as possible, in my personal opinion. Back to your journey with these restaurateurs, some of the folks that you were working for, who taught you the most about how to pay attention to the numbers and how to be a business first, is what you said. Pull back some of the big lessons you've learned on what it takes to just, let's just be honest, to survive. If you're surviving in this industry, you're doing something right. So who taught you how to survive?
Sure. Well, I think that Chef Floyd had probably the smartest and most the best approach to being economical about food, right? Because we bought the best products in the market. We were at the green market every single day. All of our sort of meat was like, we were breaking down all of our whole animals, but they were coming from amazing farms. And what I learned from Floyd was that you can do, and also just the beauty of cooking, right, is that we used everything, right? And it wasn't just that we used everything, but we got excited about the little things. You got excited about the beet leaves. You got excited about hey, if we get this whole goat, there's 20 things we can do, and you can generate revenue from all of these things.
You just hit on something that's key. I think that we need to get people excited. In order to do this well, we need to make a game. We need to make people excited. So how did he excite people to do these, what is the key to tapping into that excitement around how to stretch your product as far as possible?
Well, I think that's part of our sort of job in this case as a chef, but really in any business, is to sort of motivate your team to get excited about finding new sort of like new ways to generate revenue from what you already have. It's funny because I always sort of correlate business in general to this is going to sound really stupid, but to whole animal butchery, right? Because and it's so apparent now with restaurants, right? You see ghost kitchens, you see people doing virtual kitchens and things like that, and it's like you have restaurants that were a fine dining restaurant that were just doing dinner service 5 days a week, and it's like, dude, you're paying rent 7 days a week, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? So it's kind of like you're buying a whole pig and you're just using the tenderloin. Like you're paying rent 24 hours a day, and you have a kitchen that can execute X amount of food. So what are all the ways in which you can generate revenue? That's really with any business, but in restaurants in particular, I think that restaurant owners are really starting to see, wait a second, I need to figure out other ways, other revenue streams outside of just the coming in and sitting down at my restaurant. Takeout is now ubiquitous, right? It's not something that just fast food restaurants do. It's something that every restaurant does.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going away.
No, I'm curious. I mean, we are kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but what are the most interesting revenue streams you've seen, say, in the past 12 months that has you most interested? Are you still restaurant touring to this day, or are you solely in 100% on Meez?
I think at this point, I'm as close to 100% in Meez as possible. So I've stepped away from all my day-to-day with the restaurant group, and
we can talk about that. I think that there might be some. I'm going to shelf that. I think not enough people have an exit strategy. I'm curious to see what yours was. But I mean, you did mention that there's this so much opportunity to diversify right now and to create other channels of revenue. And we kind of get stuck in the traditional way of making money in the restaurant business. I mean, some of the things that are coming to my mind right now are subscription plans. Just like you mentioned, ghost kitchens, really using your restaurant as a test kitchen to try new things to probe the market. What are some of the other things you're seeing that's interesting?
Yeah, I think the virtual kitchen is obviously becoming really big. There's a lot of restaurants that are creating their own additional concepts out of their restaurant to to take up a new day part. So maybe they have a breakfast concept or something like that. I think that's a big one. I think that in general I never sort of thought that restaurants, were going to have a downfall because of COVID, but I think that for sure the medium in which food is being delivered is definitely changing, right? So now you're seeing the proliferation of residential buildings that have really great food. That was never a thing before. I think that we'll start to see a lot more restaurant not groups, like production companies popping up that are like Aramark, but are doing,
Yes, I'm so happy you're saying this. And I think that's going to be a huge market to keep your eye on. I think there's a mass exodus of people out of cities right now. We don't need to be in cities for opportunity anymore. It's that simple. We used to have to go to the city to get the opportunity, but in the world we live in, we've proven that COVID-19 has helped us prove that we don't need to be on top of each other. We don't need to be in these big cities to work. We can spread out. We can work from home, and people are taking that cash they're earning that they were making in the city, and they're moving to like the country with it and spreading it 10 times as far. So, and the other thing is we don't need this office space anymore. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens to this vacant office space. I think you're onto something. I think it's going to become a very affordable living, and I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity in these executive kitchens that are in these corporate headquarters or whatever. And I think that there's going to be a lot of like communal type, like facility focused restaurants, like just for that building. I think you're really onto something there.
Just think about every place that you've been where there is and again, there's a place for this and I get it, but like everywhere that you've been where there's commodity food, some sort of cafeteria or craft services,
ballpark, whatever,
there are thousands of displaced talented cooks right now, thousands and thousands of them, right? And there are not thousands of restaurants reopening anytime soon. I see it every day with Meez. We have so many customers of Meez that are cooks and chefs that are just starting their own thing. It's amazing to see, but I really do think that there's going to be an influx of great food in places where you weren't used to seeing great food. Hospitals will probably be another one, right? Like, why do we have shitty food in hospitals?
I know, it's how ironic is that?
Yeah.
Because the hospitals are looking for more business, man. Anyway, that's maybe a subject for another day. I don't know if anybody got that, but I'm gonna roll off of that subject. So anyway, back to your story. We were talking about the key lessons you learned with business from some of these mentors, stretching the product, getting the most out of the product. Anything else worth bringing to the surface before we kind of talk about how you broke off to open your own restaurant group?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there's lessons that from every restaurant I've been at that are not necessarily cooking lessons that I've taken with me. Some of them are just sort of how you manage, and some of them are how you run a business. I remember distinctly at Boulay, there was we had just oh no, this was before this, but at Boulay, there was some server, I think, and they were a dancer. They were a really great dancer, and I think we had just actually lost our 4th star. And I just remember so clearly Boulay saying, he gave a speech, and he was, he was very passionate about it. And he said, if you can come, some of you are dancers, some of you are singers, some of you are, are doing this as a side gig. But if you can give 100% while you're in this kitchen or in this restaurant, that's something that is not your number one passion. Think how amazing you'll be able to be by practicing that, in your real job. So I've always taken that with me for anybody that that's working for me, where this might be something that they're doing while they're working on something else. And I think I think that's always been a great lesson. And also, actually in the same restaurant, this guy Cesar Ramirez, really great chef, quite a character. If anybody that knows him. But honestly, one thing that he taught me also was, Boulay was a, I mean, everybody that worked there, can attest. It was a tough kitchen, but it was a great one. And, but it was, unforgiving, and you could very easily complain about, 15-hour days, and, pay being what it was, and 110 degrees and all that jazz. And, but I just remember distinctly one day Cesar saying, a job is what you make it, right? So, and I don't know if he meant this by it, but to me, what it meant was, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, it's only going to be as great as whatever you make it, right? So I see this all the time, especially, I saw it running the restaurant group. I've seen it running my businesses, where you always have those, those employees that are just upset about the way that things are, right? And it's so easy to sort of complain about that. But it's so compelling to find people and ways to say, hey, wait a second, I can make this better. I can change this. And even if you don't own the company, if you can find a way to make it better. And that's what I look for in employees, is people that are sort of like trying to make it their own. And that I think that sort of characteristic is probably one of the most important things I find in anybody that I have work for me, and that I strive for myself, is to always try to make the best of whatever situation you're in, and not just the best, but try to make it better.
Perception is reality. It's that simple. Whatever you perceive is true to you. But it sounds like it was this was kind of a triggering for you. This speech that Chef Boulay gave was that, hey, if you're able to show up like you did for me, for something that was just a job, like, what could you do for yourself if you leaned into your own passion? So it sounds like that was a kind of like an enlightening moment for you, where what switched inside of you in that moment that made you want to go chase your own thing?
Well, I mean, honestly, I've always been sort of entrepreneurial, and I think that I've always known that I wanted to, before that, I always knew I wanted to open my own restaurant. And so I did that. I owned and operated my own restaurants for eight or so years. And so I always knew that, that what I was doing in the moment of cooking was, even though I loved it, there was other things that I wanted to do. So I think that, I think that was already sort of inside of me. I'll be honest, like, there's so much, we were talking about, like, learning the things that you shouldn't do. There was so much about Boulay that that has stuck with me, about things that you should not do, things that you just to consider. And I think with any kitchen, there's just so many life lessons you can gain from the.
Yeah, I think I want to pull back some layers. I think right now is a great time to take our first break to thank our sponsors, and we'll be right back to kind of dive into some of the things you should not do. And then obviously we still got to talk about how you scaled your business, and then exit strategy, I think, is huge. And we have to talk about Meez, your current project, and how that all formed. So we'll be right back. To everybody who's joined, thank you for joining us. We're going to do a Q&A at the end of today's conversation. So we're planning on going for about another 45 minutes. I hope you guys can stick around that entire time. If you cannot, and you would like me to ask your question, feel free to write your question down in the chat feature, and we will get to it. Also, if you're here and you guys are into Clubhouse, at 5:30 on my drive to New York City, I'm going to be connecting with Mario Del Piero, and we're going to do a Clubhouse while I drive to New York City in a snowstorm. So wish me luck. It'll be interesting. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Right, let's get back after it. We're back, and I want to see if I can't highlight some of these things not to do. I love the things not to do conversation. So what were some of the biggest things you learned not to do before opening your own place?
Well, look, I think that it's funny because I was we have on Facebook, there was a post going on about Meez, and I saw some chefs in a heated debate about it. About recipes are sacred and they should only be on paper, or they shouldn't even be written, and it's all about feel. And it's so funny that like I'm so torn with it, because there's this like dichotomy of like cooking is creating, but it's also a craft, it's also a business, and it's also you're running a team. And I think at Poulet, there was no recipes. There was no recipes for anything. And so no one really like knew how to do anything. And also it was very tough to learn how to do these things. I mean, look, some of it might've been shortcomings, and some of it might've been that just, there wasn't really like a standard of how to do things. And that was almost like touted as a good thing. I remember like this guy, Evan Rich, was on the meat station, and he has a really great spot in San Francisco now, Rich Table. But I remember he made a recipe for the pomme puree, which is, the pomme puree was like something that Poulet was known for. It's amazing, and we always use different oils to finish it. But he had the ratio of the butter to the potato, and I was like, oh my gosh, now at least it's gonna be a little less likely to get screwed up. And I think that one of the biggest lessons from Poulet was that to be truly creative, to be truly sort of in your flow, especially as a chef, you have to first be very organized. That's a big part of the pillars of what Meez is all about, really, is that I want every chef to be able to sort of create and be free flowing and be able to sort of think and change and iterate. But to do that, you need to be, organized and prepared, and you have to have some sort of semblance of structure to work off of. And I think that was a lesson that I learned there, because there was almost none, right? It was, every day was basically like Groundhog Day, and every day was, you sort of had to create the standards for your station. And it worked when there was a lot of great cooks, and there were a lot of great cooks there. Most of them are now very successful restaurant owners or restaurant chefs, but those cooks are not always around, right? And so when you don't have good cooks, then you just have shitty food. And I think that's what chefs and restaurants are starting to realize, is like, if you really want to scale good food, and that's a big part of my sort of like mission in life, is how do you scale good food, is you gotta have structure. You have to have process,
Exactly. And I think that's probably, I'm sure we'll pull back some layers in how Meez helps restaurants do that. I am really curious. And we're kind of doing like a hybrid interview right now, because I want to share your story, because I know as a restaurateur, just through your come up, I'm sure you have knowledge. I think what I love about what you've done is that you think outside the box. I think that if people open restaurants, they kind of think there's a one track there's one track, open a restaurant, then open as many as possible, and that's how you make your money. But I think there's also ways to make money in this industry by identifying pain points, by identifying things that can be done better, and then being the solution, and then having that be your cash cow. And I think that's kind of what you've done, which I think we can learn from that. But how did you, really just kind of paint the picture from, I say, 2009 to present day? I know you started, you were part of the Orify brands. What was going on? Paint the picture of what's happened in your career from 2009 to opening your first restaurant, which is Bark, New York City, to present day. What's going on? Again, go to 30,000 feet and just kind of give us that big picture.
Yeah, sure. So, I think, with Bark, we set out to change the perception of fast food in America, right? So that was sort of our goal. When I say myself and my business partner at the time. And for me, I never want to do anything that is just status quo, and I never really want to I'm not a big fan of competition. So, and that's what I love Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1, because it really resonates. You know, you either build something that's 10 times better than everything else that exists, or build something that doesn't exist at all. And I think I've tried to do that with everything I've done as an entrepreneur. And it's, you know, it's something that will always stick with me, is that, you know, and so sort of paint the picture, started Bark in 2000, and we signed a lease in 2008. It was built by 2009, opened 3 or 4 locations of that over the course of like 8 or so years. And then through that time, the whole time I knew I really wanted to build this thing, Meez. And candidly, like, you know, I loved Bark, but it was something that I had planned to sort of build and then sort of migrate to the next thing. And my business partner ended up moving to San Francisco, you know, to be with his family. And so I ended up staying on with Bark a lot longer than I had planned. But after about 8 years, I knew sort of, okay, my next, you know, I really want to start focusing on building Meez. And that was around 2015. And I'd already been working on it, sort of like, you know, just doing all the due diligence and sort of just asking all of my friends in my network, like, what do you guys use? What do you, you know, what tools do you use? And that's sort of when I came across Orify. We had Orify, and I had been chatting for a while. The CEO, Andy, is a really, really great guy. And we had connected a couple of times just about sort of investments and things like that. And I ended up sort of like, you know, making a deal to come to Orify, and essentially saying, look, well, I'll come work here, and you'll, you know, help me to get the resources I need to build Meez, and I'm going to help scale this business, right, from a culinary standpoint. So came to Orify. It ended up being, you know, a little over 4 years. I left there in January of last year. I was chief operating officer. And so from that time, you know, I think we had like, I don't remember, like 8 locations, and now there's over 100, and, you know, and six or 7 brands, you know, across the country, and, you know, a couple acquisitions along the way. And so learned a ton there and built a lot of what Meez has become. We built within the Orify ecosystem before we started rolling it out to a lot of other restaurants. And then, you know, as of about a year ago, I've been 100% focused on Meez.
So I'm going to make some assumptions here. Feel free to correct me, but it sounds like what the origin of Meez came from you recognizing that in order to scale something, you need systems, processes, procedures. But one of the hardest things to scale is the recipe, is scaling recipes, scaling food done well. So you wanted to create a tool, and that was a pain point that you identified. You said, hey, this is a big challenge. This is a big pain point for scaling, is how do we scale the skill of doing food well? And how do we create system and process around that, so we can have somebody who's a creative, be the creative, and then have a platform to load that creativity up to, so it can be recreated through multiple concepts all over the nation. Is that kind of,
well, you know, Eric, I'll be honest, that sounds awesome, and I think
too much credit.
it became that while I was at Orify originally. Just to be honest with you, the impetus for Meez originally came in 2004. I was working for Chef Floyd at Tabla, and I was working in the morning for free for Vitali at his charcuterie shop in Union Square, and I had this book like this with hundreds of all the recipes of you know, of all the charcuterie I was making, and the humidity, the temperature, the percentages of each thing, the time, all the little notes about you know, moisture levels and things like that, bacteria. And I fucking lost the notebook. And I was like trailing at this, you know, I used to just trail for fun. I was like
somebody was like, get that notebook. That notebook's gold. It was probably stolen.
Yeah. So I left it. I lost it. I was like, I think it was at Veritas. I was like trailing there just for fun. And I lost it. And so again, this was 2004. Evernote didn't exist. So originally I was like, I wanted a place to store everything digitally. Like I want all my notes digital. You know, of course, now that's really easy, right? So Evernote exists for that.
I'm happy you're using Evernote as an example, because I've been explaining to people that Meez is like Evernote for chefs.
Yeah, well, that's honestly, that was originally what I wanted to do, was build Evernote for chefs. And then, so fast forward, once I started like, you know, working on this idea, I realized there was something more to it than this, right? Because, you know, I think in business, especially in the sort of technology business, there's a sort of adage of like, you're either building a vitamin or you're building a painkiller, right? A vitamin is a nice to have and a painkiller is a need to have, right? And so, you know, compounded on top of that sort of that anecdote, I was pissed that chefs don't have a tool for ourselves, right? So like, I've hired designers and I've hired architects and, you know, and photographers, and I see the things that they use, and they have AutoCAD and they have Figma or Adobe and they have Photoshop and you know, so mostly I'm just like, why don't we have our own tool? Like we're a pretty big industry as well. We're professionals. We're a craft.
Second largest industry.
Yeah. So that's honestly my number one sort of mission, right? Is to build the tool for the culinary industry, right? And unfortunately today, when you think of recipe software, which is mostly what's synonymous with culinary, you think of inventory, which is fucking crazy. Like that's an accounting thing. You need to do that to account for the cost of your recipes, or a cost of, like, if you need to get an actual versus theoretical food costs and you want to get beginning inventory, that's all very necessary, but that's not culinary, right? That's accounting,
Operations,
right?
Yeah.
And you have to get a recipe into that thing. And we're working on lots of really cool ways to sort of push recipe data to those systems, but it's not a culinary tool. And so for me, the inspiration was to build a tool for us. And what I will say is, along the way, you know, my investors were, my original investors were with Orify, and Orify is a very large restaurant group. And whereas they also they were super appreciative of the sentiment of what I was building, they also, of course, wanted something that did the other part of the business as well. So we spent a lot of time, which ended up being invaluable. I spent a lot of time building the other side of the tool as well, so that you can get all that sort of output that you need of cost and things like that, but still have a tool that's really built for culinary. And there's a lot sort of that goes into how we did that, and I think that's kind of like the special sauce. And happy to talk about that. But you know, for me, I'm the great thing about what we're doing is also the hardest thing about what we're doing is that there really isn't any competition, right? There's because there's not a tool for chefs. There's not a
and you're bringing up a really great point. And you mentioned it earlier, and it's the 0 to 1. And or there's a lot of different things. And I talk about this all the time on the show. If you can create something and it's a unique thing that's never been done before, you instantly are number one. You're instantly the best at it. I think there's something to be said about doing one thing really well. And it doesn't have to be an invention. It could just be a void in whatever market you're in, you know, but just focus on doing one thing really well and own that one thing. And I really support that sentiment. And also another thing that we can pull from your story is, where's your pain? What's your challenge? Like, what's the one thing that you wish you could change about your life? Odds are somebody else has the same pain point. And that's exactly how Restaurant Unstoppable podcast was formed. I was a young dude, 26 years old, looking to learn from successful restaurateurs how they did it. And that podcast did not exist. And I said to myself, I cannot be the only one that wants a hyper-focused restaurant business podcast. I cannot be the only one that wants to hear the stories of successful restaurateurs. So I created it, you know, and there's something to be said about that. So if you're listening to this and you're in the industry and you found a pain point and you've created a solution, or you have an idea for a solution, lean into that. Make that like that could be your cash cow. That could be your break. So I just want to highlight those things. It's super important. I really want to start pulling back the layer on Meez now. So really explain the platform to us. And I know we're going to try to schedule a live demo. I don't know when that's going to be. But if you join restaurantunstoppablenetwork.com, we will let you guys know when that live demo will be. I'm going to be connecting with a Little Beat tomorrow, and hopefully they're going to demo, because they're one of your biggest advocates, right? So just kind of paint that picture, really kind of take us through the benefits of Meez and how these restaurants who are the early adopters are truly being like benefiting from this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think, you know, first and foremost, it's a culinary content platform, right? It's where you should store everything that relates to culinary. That means all your recipes, all your processes, you know, everything in one place, right? obviously the origin of Meez is mise en place, and everybody knows what that means. Or if you don't, it means everything in its place. But the idea is we want to have one place where all that stuff lives, and of course, we built really sort of dynamic, sort of proprietary search engines that let you find that content really easily, way easier than you could if you had it in, say, Google Drive or something like that. So on top of that, it is a recipe development, training, and costing tool. And so the primary technology is really focused on the management and sort of creation and using recipes, right? So we spent, about, now it's been almost 6 years building out a database of thousands and thousands and thousands of ingredients, all customizable in the app, but they're all built in so that you have your yields and conversions for everything that you can think of already sort of in the app, right? So when you want to use julienne, torpedo shallots, or you want to use, a oblique carrot, or you want to use peeled red onions, or you want to use dark rye flour, all the sort of like weight to volume to each is all sort of built out for you, and you can customize it. And then we built all the sort of scaling, which in the way that you would actually scale recipes. So I think, I'm going to get a little bit granular, but whatever, it's fine. One thing that always pisses me off about recipe apps is like, when you can scale something and it's like, I'll make the 2x, or I'll make 4x or 5x. Usually what happens, not usually, always outside of Meez, like if you have something that's in teaspoons or in kilograms or in
conversion gets messed up.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to show you 47 teaspoons of something or 0.045 cups, which is literally useless, right? There's nothing I can do with that, right? So it turns out the logic to build that was very hard, but we spent a long time building out all the logic so that when you scale down or you scale up, all your units of measure are going to convert the way you actually use them. So you're going to get 3 gallons plus 3/4 of a cup if you scale that cup up a bunch. And if you scale it down, you might get, 3/4 of a teaspoon as opposed to 0.0045 cups. And the same thing with kilograms and all that jazz. And then the way that you get your content in there is also sort of one of the sort of biggest sticking points of the software, because we spent months and months and months working on, how do you get all this disparate recipe content into one platform that can then be like structured, right? So that you can actually search it and you can access your recipes and sub recipes and search your ingredients and scale it up and have that scaling actually work. And so, first we spent a couple of years analyzing thousands and thousands and thousands of recipes, understanding that I have a cognitive bias about like how I might write a recipe. We just looked at every recipe format you can think of, from Word docs and Excel docs and PDFs and websites and PowerPoints and notebooks. And we said, how do we start to build structure on this so that you can take that and copy it and then paste it into Meez? And we know that you mean julienne, shallots, right? Even if you write, something random, or you misspell it, or you use a different word, or you use jus instead of juice, or you put the word first or the number first. And so it's really, really, really quick to get all your content in. And so now now you have all your content in this platform, right? It's all scalable, it's all searchable. Because of all that yield and conversion data, you can get costs really quickly, right? So if you have a recipe that has, a half a cup of shredded lettuce and, 3 peeled shallots and, a quarter cup of brown sugar. I'm just kind of making up, it's on a recipe. It sounds crazy actually, but all those things, no matter if you buy that lettuce by a 24 count case, which is probably how you buy it, even if you buy it that way, but you just put a half a cup of shredded lettuce, it's already costed for you. I might be talking gibberish to somebody that doesn't have to put recipes into a costing system, but if you do, my pain, and it's insane. So it's like a fun little fact is that less than 20% of all sort of users of inventory software actually put recipes into that software because it's so difficult to do that. So we're sort of removing that sort of pain point for everybody, so you can get recipes uploaded really quickly, get your costs really quickly, and then we have some really cool ways in which you can share access of those recipes to your team.
So,
make sure. they see the most, recent recipe, and that they're seeing live updates and all that jazz.
So you dropped a ton on us, and I'm loving every bit of it. I'm taking notes. I want to start dissecting some of the benefits, the features that you've created in Meez. One of the first questions I have that comes to mind as you're describing this product, I'm thinking to myself, this sounds like Meez sounds a lot like the digital form of the Flavor Bible. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, Karen.
I am familiar
right?
with that book.
Yeah. So, and I'm just curious. So when you open the Flavor Bible, it's basically just a database of all these ingredients, the nutritional value, the calories, the best methods of preparation, what pairs well with these things, and the flavor infinities. I mean, like, what's stopping you? Have you thought about like having features like that? Like, oh, like these are the ingredients I have in my walk-in right now. How do I use this up? Like, how can I pair these things? Has it gotten to that place yet?
So we keep a list of feature requests from all of our users, and it's definitely one of the top that we've gotten is like, can you just integrate the Flavor Bible data into the ingredients? And the answer is yes. I would do it without.
Do you know Karen Page? I'll make the introduction. I'm sure you're very
yeah. I would obviously want to have them benefit from that somehow, but the way that we built our data infrastructure is such that we can continually add more. We can keep enriching it with more things, right? So that onion, that shallot that now has yield and conversion data, and has allergen data, and has nutrition data, we can start adding, we can add the history of the shallot to it. We can add what things it pairs well with. We can add chemical sort of compound.
Another feature that I'm seeing this being really beneficial is a lot of people want to know right on the menu, smack dab, like, what is the nutritional value? What's the total calorie count of this meal I'm about to consume? And if you know the portions, the ratios that are going into one serving, that's a really easy thing to calculate with a tool like Meez, I would assume.
Yeah, that's actually our next release is nutrition, and we've spent some time on. I wanted to make sure when we release it, we were going to release it at the end of last year, but I want to make sure when it's released, it's the #1 requested feature, by the way.
Yeah.
It's easy to use, right? Because I've seen all this software that a big part of, and again, I think this is with for any business, and it's sort of how I think about, it's one of the principles for how we build with Meez, is that nothing really matters, like in terms of a report or a feature or a tool, unless it's actually usable every day, right? So, a nutrition tool is great if you could use it on the fly, or you can use it as you need. But if it takes you an hour to get the nutrition for a recipe, to me, that's sort of like a waste of time. It's kind of like seeing, a report of sales from the last 3 weeks when I'm trying to do, purchasing. It's like, I want to know today what's going on.
So I think the other things we haven't really pulled back the layers on, I think we've identified this first and foremost as a recipe development tool, a way to keep track of your notes on how to get to that endpoint every time. It's a costing tool, which we've identified, which is huge. And it's a training tool. And I think the costing tool and the training tool are probably, as far as ROI, the two big ones I would think of. Like, I'm going to invest in this tool. Like, obviously it's great to have my mise en place with my recipes. That in itself is inherently valuable. But I think where you really start to get your return on investment is streamlining the costing process. And more importantly, this is also, it sounds like an e-learning platform essentially for recipes and cooking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, a big part of the training tech is making it really easy to get all of your all your material in there. So we built video and image compression so that you can very quickly, almost like Instagram stories, add in all of your prep steps as videos or pictures from your phone, and as well as sort of like just any sort of general documentation that you have, and matching formats. And I always find that people learn best just in time, not just in case. And so the more that they have when they're looking at a recipe, if there's steps where the chef is showing them, hey, when you're reducing these shallots, look for this, right? This is the color that you want. You want to make sure you're scraping the side like this. And when you pass it through the tammy, look out, and showing them that, right? In a video that you can actually update in real time if people are making mistakes. And we see it all the time now. We see it where chefs notice that there's mistakes being made. They update the recipe with a new video prep step, and everybody and all of the locations are getting right away a new sort of the updated sort of training guidelines. And we're also, in the beginning stages of partnering with, I'll be a little bit coy about this, but we are becoming the recipe technology for a really great culinary school. And that's been a big part of how we've been building the learning part of culinary as well, of how we leverage the Meez tech to use it as a training platform.
I love this, man. Anything we have not identified up at this point as far as unique selling propositions, return on investment? How is this thing really going to make you and your team more efficient? Now's the time to unpackage this so we can leave time for Q&A.
Sure. I mean, look, I think at the end of the day, anybody and I think that most people that are listening to this are operators. And we built a tool for operators, right? This is not a tool that's academic, right? It's not a tool that you spend 4 months implementing so that you can at some point get some sort of output of cost or some sort of metric of analytics. Like today, the day you start using Meez is the day you start getting value out of it. And it's built to really just be super easy to use so that anybody can start picking up and using it. So, and the more feedback we get, the more we improve upon that. So I think for me as an operator, as a chef, and as a former restaurant owner, like that's the most important attribute of any tool that we use, like in the restaurant, right? Is it's got to be usable. It's got to be something that like you can actually apply and use on a day-to-day. And so that is hopefully what comes through when you first pick up Meez.
I love it. So one thing I kind of wanted to get at, and this is kind of being maybe a little bit of a bonus feature or a bonus contribution to today's conversation, this idea of an exit strategy within the industry. You were able to, scale your business with the Bark New York City and to join. I mean, like what advice do you have for an exit strategy as far as how to build something, how to create value, and how to sell it to create more opportunity for yourself? I think is one last nugget we can get from you as an operator.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there's a lot of ways to sort of measure what the exit strategy should be. So I don't want this to come off as just financial, because
most people's exit strategy in the restaurant industry is die. So I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think the idea to think that you're going to sell your restaurant or restaurant group to another group is not likely. So the only way to really build enough value is to have enough demand, right? So one 4-wall of a box, no matter what, is not going to be enough demand unless you are a destination where people are coming from all over the world, right? So you have to step back and think about it. How do I build enough demand for my business that the value is greater than that the output is greater than the input, and that's a tough one with restaurants. And so I think that the more that people in the food business can think about other ways to generate revenue within their sort of within their business is going to be the best way to have some sort of an exit strategy in that regard.
So what are the best ways you see people? We kind of touched on this a little bit, but reiterate. You talked about the new opportunity in some of these spaces, these void commercial spaces. But what are some of the things that people are doing that you think is a great way to diversify a portfolio for a restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there's a ton that are already becoming more prevalent. Like, I think virtual kitchens is certainly not going away. I think CPG is another big one that people have an opportunity. Consumer packaged goods. So like taking your products and productizing them to be in stores, right? I think there's an opportunity there, because I think the thing to remember is, and again, I think the word exit strategy is where I get stuck a bit, because I think of exit as an acquisition, right? Or selling your company. Or I think of it as like getting out of an industry and getting into another one. So,
or, retiring, selling your business as an asset to stop working.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think as it pertains to a technology company, of course, you're like, for me, I think about right now. I try not to think about the exit, because I have so much more I want to build with Meez, and for me, I love doing this. And I think that, you know, the sooner I start thinking about an exit, the sooner my focus is being taken away from what matters today. That said, everybody has to have an exit strategy. Like if you go to any sort of investor, right, they're going to ask you, you know, either what is your exit, or how do you scale this to 100 million, right? And so you have to have that answer at least somewhat in your head of here's the tactics that I'll need to be able to get to like X amount of revenue. And if you don't have that already thought out, it's not just going to happen. You know, it's not just going to, like, one day you're just going to generate more revenue. So I think in the restaurant business, there's lots of ways to go about it. Like I said, you know, virtual kitchens and CPGs, shared services, you know, food service, outposts. There's a ton of things that, you know, that you can do if you want. You know, the restaurant, the whole restaurant game is really, how do you increase the ceiling? How do you make your ceiling higher, right? If you think that right now your four walls can do 3 million, how do you make that 4 million? And then how do you reduce your theoretical food cost, right? So your theoretical cost in general, right? So if theoretically it should be a 30% COGS and I can get it to 25%, and I can only do 3 million, but now I can do 4. That's how you start, you know.
Do you know of any good tools out there that can help us reduce our food?
I've got a couple ideas for that.
So real quick, well, how is Meez helping us reduce our food costs? And we'll wrap up on that question, and then we'll start doing some Q&A.
Sure. So I mean, I think we specifically built the engineering piece of the recipe to do just that. And so, you know, I don't want to oversimplify this, but it is not easy to see as you're creating your recipes, what that means in terms of cost, what that means in terms of profit, what that means in terms of how you should sell it. And we built within Meez, you know, first of all, the recipes in Meez look like a recipe that you actually use, not an invoice. And so your chef, or the chef, if you're the one that's listening, you know, as you're creating your recipe, every time you change something, you're going to see that food cost percentage, that profit, and that sell price change, right? And then you can start to pull those levers. We have literally, there's just levers that you can pull to change that cost. So maybe I'll add on a couple more, you know, a couple more grams of provolone, but I'm going to reduce the prosciutto by this much. And then you scale, you do the same thing with a menu, right? So, you know, if the theoretical food cost of your menu is 24%, then I change this recipe, then now my food cost percentage just went down. That there's not really an eye into that right now in the restaurant business. And so that's what we're building with Meez.
I love it. I've loved this conversation. We're going to open it up now. If you want to have questions about Meez, where to find it, how to use it, features, we do still have a few people. We had a good amount of people that were hanging out with us. Some have dropped off. That's what happens when I go on too long. But hopefully some of you who have stuck around do have some questions. If you do have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. Mario Love. Oh, I think she was talking about, Anna Tazan was talking about my clubhouse with Mario. That's going to be happening in about an hour and a half on my drive down to New York. Not all at once, you guys. I'm going to start to call on people. It's what I do. So any hands going up? If you don't know how to raise your hand, just hover over your name and tap the more button. And then there's an option to raise your hand. Or you can just go ahead and turn your video on if you want, and you can literally raise your hand. No. All right. No questions. So everyone's shy today. You answered my questions, man, for what it's worth. Anything that we had not discussed up to this point that you were hoping would come out of the conversation that did not come out of the conversation?
You know, I didn't have too many expectations. So I think this was great, man. It was good to catch up with you.
Yeah.
See your face in person. So yeah, thanks, man.
My pleasure. So real quick before we say goodbye, how can we connect with you if we want to learn more about Meez, or we want to connect with you personally? What's the best way to connect?
So you can go to getmeez.com. That's our website, and lots of ways to sort of try out the product or book a demo. I can throw my my email up. That you can actually get the email right from the website as well. But on the website there's probably 20 different ways to get a hold of us. So.
Beautiful. And this was a live recording. If you guys are interested in joining the conversation, if you want to listen to these episodes live, real time, you can do that. Head over to restaurantunstoppablenetwork.com to have access to me regularly and the restaurateurs I have on the show. And it's just it's a community of Restaurant Unstoppable loyal listeners. It's lonely at the top. It doesn't have to be. And I'm going to be giving Josh lifetime access to that network as well. It's up to him if he wants to join it, but maybe that's another way you might be able to connect with Josh. And the plan is within the network around the time this episode goes live, which it's scheduled to go live around February 18th. I'm going to be connecting with the Little Beat in New York City. That's why I'm driving to the Little Beat. We're going to be demoing the product in New York. So hopefully we have some content to go that will be associated with this episode. And I would love to do a live demo of Little Beat in the network maybe a week after this episode goes live. So if you guys are interested in connecting live with Josh in the network and myself, head over to restaurantunstoppable.com/780. This is episode 780. I'll have links to join the network. We'll probably have the recording of that demo with with Little Beat in the show notes as well, if you want to see what Meez looks like. And we wrap up every show, Josh, by calling somebody out. So who's somebody you respect and admire in this industry? Somebody you look up to that if you knew I was interviewing this person tomorrow, you'd be listening to that episode. Who do you respect and admire? Call them out.
Do you mean in the restaurant industry?
Yes.
There's so many. Do you mean do you want a restaurant person or a tech person?
A restaurateur. Who's a restaurateur that you think has an incredible story, who, if it was a guest on the show, like my traditional restaurateur guests are, who would make a great guest mentor?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, I actually really, I really think you'd get a kick out of talking with John Rigos. He's a restaurateur, but he's also just a super sharp dude. So he's probably a great one. I mean, look, I think there's so many of them though that
What's John's restaurant group?
John? No, John's from Orpha. He's the CEO of Orpha.
Oh, thank you. John, look, I'm coming after you. I'd love to get you on the show. And I think that's everything. And I will say, we have discussed that there is an affiliate opportunity here with me. So if you do use my links to check out Meez, you are supporting the show. And I just want to say thank you very much in advance. So with that said, thank you so much, Josh, for taking the time to share your story and to create some awareness about what you're doing over there with Meez. And there is no questioning, you are unstoppable.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you very much. And we'll cut it there.